All right. Ready for the main event with De Los Santos taking on Shakur Stevenson. And here we go. They are currently announcing the guys in the ring right now, and the battle is about to commence. So, who saw the Fury versus Usyk presser drama today? Right? Sort of out of character with Fury, although not really, depending on the type of person that he fights. Obviously, he didn't do much of that with Francis Ngannou, but he did with Usyk probably because of the history that had gone on. And then obviously you have Brendan Allen taking on Paul Craig this coming weekend, as we are just waiting for the main event for Shakur Stevenson versus De Los Santos for the 130-pound WBC lightweight championship of the world. So here we go. Let's see here. Yeah, from Brick City, New Jersey. New Jersey has had quite some historical gyms in the past when it comes to boxing gyms, and obviously Shakur Stevenson. Yeah. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you guys are currently tuned in to this particular content right now for all your combat sports needs and everything else in between. So here we go. The fighters are being instructed in the middle of the ring right now, and we are about to commence round number one. Here we go, round one. And by the way, as we're going on, we're going to talk about some MMA as well. So here comes Shakur Stevenson in the middle of the ring. Edwin goes for a big swing straight away in the first 5 seconds, misses. Shakur keeps his distance at gauge. Yeah, Bradley said that he's going to try to manage the speed and whatnot. And I think I kind of see exactly what he means by that. By the way, shout outs to YBP MMA. I also notice he's covering this fight as well, which is I think is good because look, here's the thing, right? If you're covering MMA, it's not just MMA as the one particular sport that you're covering. MMA encompasses all martial arts, so it's always good and it's always credible of a page to cover boxing as well, even if you have an MMA moniker to your name of some sort. So don't forget to like and subscribe. Here we go. First round, the first minute is in. They're still kind of feeling each other out. Shakur is gauging himself in the jab exchanges as he's backing away every time Edwin is moving in on him. So here we go. According to Andre Ward, he mentions that he's only moving in straight lines and whatnot. And I think I know what he means by that in terms of just the jabs that he's throwing at him right now. 130, 129, 128 of the first round. Not much real significant strikes going on, but okay, there we go. There's one jab from Shakur Stevenson. So one of the things that Andre Ward really emphasizes on when it comes to, let's say, throwing your jab or things of that nature, it's pretty much one of those things where you can't get bored at it, which I think is really fascinating, right? He says that when you're doing a jab, and I'm talking about Andre Ward as we're watching the last 60 seconds of the first round right now. Andre Ward mentions this because it's a very important part of your boxing, right? Because it is what gauges the distance, it is what gauges the sort of your spearhead to the attack that you're trying to do. So, in order for you to have a good jab, you have to constantly do it. You have to constantly stick it in there. And you also can't be afraid of that being your only punch in the in a single round if that's all you have to do. Now, if you remember, I believe there's this guy named Willie. or something to that extent, like back in the days, who won an entire round without even throwing a single punch by just allowing a guy to throw shots at him and missing the whole entire time. So these are some of the fundamentals that you have to understand as we are closing in on the first round right now with sort of a feel out process here. So there goes round number one. I would imagine that round would probably go to Shakur Stevenson. I'm going to write on the comment section. You guys can write on the comment section below what you think your score is for this round. I'm going to give the first round to Shakur Stevenson for round one. And you guys can do the same right here if you want. So we can kind of compare and contrast. Because usually when I was reacting to, well, no, I don't think I was reacting to the Francis Ngannou or the Tyson Fury fight. It was more like the post fight that I did. I sort of gave my opinion on a fight without actually giving the score. So this time, I think let's try to make one of these fights the actual ones that you're actually putting on a scoreboard of some sort. So yeah, first round, I'm going to give to Shakur round one at 10-9 from there. If you guys want to throw in your opinions as well, I'd be more than happy to get your take on it. But for round one, I give it to Shakur. Here we go. Round two. 255, 254, 253 of the second round. And by the way, guys, don't forget to like and subscribe to this particular channel if you guys want all your combat sports needs and boxing, MMA, and everything in between. But of course, mostly MMA. But I cover some good boxing as well because it's an important aspect of mixed martial arts. So here we go. 230 of the second round, which of course Stevenson still within the feeling out process. 225, 224, boom, another jab by Shakur. Every time he throws that jab, he sticks it in there and then he goes and sort of steps back, right? And I wonder what is that? It's a little bit of a slip from Shakur there. So here we go. Shakur's backing up as Edwin is sort of moving in on him, sort of trying to close him in as Shakur is trying to gauge the distance. He's in and out at the same time, right? Meaning that like he throws in a jab and then he backs up. If you notice right here on 150, 149, 148, 147 of the second round. So again, like I said, we will talk about mixed martial arts as well as boxing as we're going through this whole entire fight and reacting to it. Here comes Edwin with a double jab moving forward, double jab. Here we go. And now he tries to corner Shakur into a corner. He backs up. 120, 119, 118 of the second round. 116, 115. And here comes a double jab by Edwin. Misses. Of course, every time he throws that jab, Shakur backs away because right now he is in the optimal state of arousal and understanding his distance right now, right? So there it is, 59 seconds left in the second round. Every time he tries to go in for that jab, I'm talking about Edwin, Shakur has an exit plan. And here we go, 49 seconds left into the second round. Now, if this round was to end right now, I would give it to Shakur. But of course, we have 40 seconds left. And sometimes you can win an entire round by just the last 30 seconds, if not, let's say, a knockdown, which is undoubtedly going to be a 10-9, 10-8 for the other guy. Now, as the round is closing in on the second round right now with 25 seconds left, I'm going to give this to Shakur Stevenson. So I'm going to write on the comments right here 10-9 for Shakur on the second round. Of course, the round isn't over yet. 11 seconds left. And that concludes the second round, which I will give to Shakur. Round two, 10-9 for Shakur Stevenson. So once again, this time I'm really going to score the fight live as it's going on as we're waiting for the third round right now. The first two rounds so far, I gave it to Shakur Stevenson. Let me know what you guys think. And in between the rounds, in between the corner and in between the commercial, we're going to talk about MMA and also the reaction to Fury and Usyk today. So like as I was saying, right, Fury was just absolutely livid in the way that he went about the press conference that he got in his face, got a little head to head with Usyk. And because of that, well, it sort of caught the attention now for a lot of people, right? Because before this was just one of these, how do you say this, competitive architecture matches or some kind of meritocracy that you want to give to the two best guys in the world. Now, Fury sort of added some sort of flair to that. And here we go. We are going into the third round of Shakur Stevenson taking on Edwin de Los Santos. Los Santos, as in the Los Santos in the GTA game that is depicted as the fictional world of Los Angeles. But here we go. Double jab by Edwin, 244. 243, 242 of the third round. So far, 2 rounds for Shakur Stevenson. Let's see what Edwin will try to imply as these fights, as this round goes on. Here's a double jab by Edwin, misses. Shakur once again just gauging his distance against Edwin here. So here we go. Yeah, Andre Ward said right now in the commentary that he is taking his time, and rightfully so. This is something that I notice with what a lot of high level boxers do, right? So we are at 206, 205 of the third round. They like to take their time, and that's exactly what you're seeing out of Shakur right now. You've seen that with Mayweather when he took on Ricky Hatton, even when Mayweather took on Conor McGregor. He sort of used that patience, used that time of downloading the data and then attacking at the right time. And this is just something a lot of the high level boxers are really good at. Now, we always talk about how MMA fighters can transition into MMA, right? Usually, one of the things that they rely upon when they are taking on a boxer is their athleticism, their sense of grind, being able to, I mean, let's face it, perhaps maybe go a little bit harder than the boxers based on the fact that they have an anaerobic sport as opposed to an aerobic sport, which is what boxing is. Now, that is one of the things that Francis Ngannou obviously used to really negate his fight with Tyson Fury. Now here we are 105 of the third round. So how Tyson Fury, I'm sorry, how Francis Ngannou was able to look against Tyson Fury is based on athleticism. Sometimes it takes, let's say, a really highly technical boxer to download the data, which is exactly what Shakur Stevenson is doing right now with 44, 43 seconds left into the fight, into the third round. And I think later down the road or later down the rounds, I think you're going to see some sort of some sort of higher action that Shakur Stevenson is going to unload later on. But for now, yeah, this is exactly what high level boxers do. They download the data as we are dwindling down with 18 seconds left into the third round, of which I'm going to score this once again 10-9 for 4. So let me know what you guys think. Write your comments on the section below if you'd like. Let me know how you're scoring the rounds. Third round, I have it for Shakur Stevenson. There it is. So now we are in commercial. So how about some UFC news? As I was saying, here's some interesting cards they have for the UFC this weekend. Obviously, this wasn't a fight that I really covered all throughout this week because of the amount of MMA news that is going on. But in the main event, you have Brendan Allen taking on Paul Craig. By the way, looking really good in the middleweight division. The middleweight division doesn't really have a lot of strong submission artists. Maybe this is something that he can exploit, and especially with the fact that Paul Craig is moving up. I'm sorry, moving down a weight, using the grappling, as opposed to, let's say, it would be problematic if you were to lose all that weight while you are, let's say, uh, a lighter fighter, right? Because grappling, you need a lot of the weight in order for you to bully your opponent around, which is why this particular weight class is great for Paul Craig, and you've seen that in his debut. So here we go. Fourth round with Shakur Stevenson. We have it 3-0 with Shakur Stevenson in my scorecards. Let me know what you guys think. Here we go. 36% strikes for Shakur and only 12% for De Los Santos. So once again, yeah, Stevenson is definitely winning the exchanges in this fight. And once again, like I was saying, downloading all the data that he can. There you go. He ducks underneath right there as he's throwing a jab, and Edwin throws uh, a hook. And here we go. He's moving forward on Shakur Stevenson right now. Shakur Stevenson backs away. Genius of the way that he's moving, which again, he's downloading data, being very patient. Here we go. 212, 211, 210, 209 of the fourth round of this championship WBC 130-pound fight. So here we go. Oh, jab right into the stomach for Shakur Stevenson. Great job. Great job. There we go. Now they're standing in the middle of the ring. Now he's waiting to counter him. He backs away. So he's got a very good straight line going back and forth, forward and backwards in the way that Shakur Stevenson is moving. This is really good. 139, 138, 137, 136 of the fourth round. Here we go. Goes for a hook. He misses. Here goes Shakur Stevenson. Backing away, moving forward, backing away, moving forward, and in and out motion. Here we go. Shakur Stevenson ducks and slips that shot right there. 115, 114, 113, 112, 111 of the fourth round, with Shakur Stevenson taking on Edwin de los Santos. So here we go. Another jab by Shakur Stevenson. Yeah, this seems to be currently a shutout for Shakur Stevenson in the current moment of time. Right, here we go. Another jab miss by Edwin. So every time he goes up high or up low with the jab, I'm talking about Edwin, that's where the backwards and forward motion of Shakur Stevenson really comes into play. And here we go. He tries to corner him up against the ropes, and Shakur Stevenson circles away, now pushes him up against the ropes as he's backing and moving forward away in 30 seconds of the fourth round, which, by the way, I'm going to give to Shakur Stevenson for this one. So here we go. 19, 18, 17, 16, 15, 14 of the fourth round for Stevenson versus De La Los Santos. Here we go. 5 seconds left. Yeah, I'm going to give 10-9 to Shakur Stevenson on that one. 10-9 for Shakur Stevenson in the fourth round. So now let's take a look at some of the other cards in the Brendan Allen and Craig fight for this coming week. So Michael Morales, a 15-0 welterweight prospect, taking on the veteran Jake Matthews. That's going to be an interesting fight. You have Chase Hooper taking on Jordan Levitt. That's going to be a good fight. Two guys that are somewhat of big names for the hardcore matchup. And then you have Peyton Talbot taking on Nicky Aguiar. Two guys with great records. One loss for Nicky and undefeated for Peyton. Then you have Luana Pinheiro taking on Amanda Ribas, returning. Uras Medic, 9-1, taking on Metabek Orobai, 11-1. Great record. So the prelims, you got some interesting cards as well. You have Jonathan Pierce and Joanne Brito, but let's get back to the Shakur Stevenson fight right now as we go into the fifth round with a shutout currently for Shakur Stevenson, 4-0. So here we go. Fourth round, 246, 245, 244, 243. Mark Kegel has the scorecards the same as me right now, 40 out of 36 within the first four rounds. And here we go. Now they're clinched up in the corner. Referee breaks up the clinch, 228, 227, 226, 225 of the fifth round, 223, 222. So yeah, that's going to, it's interesting, right? This card that they have for the UFC this coming Saturday. Now, I was wondering for a second why they didn't have this card for a Saturday. Why? I mean, we're not complaining. We're literally seeing the fight right now, right? Who would complain to something like that? However, the reason why is because they have, well, what was that? He missed, and then Edwin missed there, and he sort of did a little dance. What was that? Fifth round, 152, 151, 150, 149, and Shakur Stevenson is still moving forward, backing away, and not allowing Edwin to back him up against the corner. But yeah, as I was saying, the reason why I think the fight is happening tonight and not Saturday is because they have an F1 Formula Racing show, which, by the way, ESPN is currently covering and advertising on top of that. So something to think about on that end, right? And then also you have the UFC, which is also a Vegas card. So, not that that matters or anything. It's not taking attention from anybody. It's just nothing more than, nothing more than just a fight night that's taking place at the Apex gym. So that's why. But yeah, a great card nonetheless. Obviously, Mick Parkin, who, by the way, I accidentally called Mick Conlon somewhere down one of my Tom Aspinall videos. I meant to say Mick Parkin. He's a 7-0 heavyweight who trains with Tom Aspinall. By the way, one of the very instrumental guys to helping him sort of deal with the new challenges that he's going to face in the heavyweight division, which obviously made him look like the way that he did when he took on Sergey Pavlovich last week. So here we go. Fifth round, 29 seconds left, 27, 26, 25. Still the same thing. I give this 10-9 to or Stevenson. Um, yeah, so here we go. And 6 seconds left. Jab connects by Shakur Stevenson. That right there, I give a fifth round to Shakur Stevenson as we are literally closing down on halfway towards this fight. So back to the UFC. Another interesting prospect that we are seeing is Christian Leroy Duncan, who is the former Cage Warriors champion. That's going to be an interesting fight. He's taking on the 35-year-old Dennis Tulolian. 8-1 for Christian and 10-8 for Dennis. So this sort of seems like a squash match and a match made for Christian Leroy Duncan. Jose Johnson taking on Chad Anglerher. McParkin, as I had mentioned, taking on Cal Machado. Jekka Sarich taking on Lucas Alexander. Lucy Pudilova taking on Alan Perez, and Trey Ogden taking on Nicholas Moda, and then Charles Johnson taking on Rafael Estevam, and John Castaneda was supposed to be in this card, but it got canceled. And then obviously the week after that, how about Daniil Dariush taking on Armin Sarukian? Okay, back to the Shakur Stevenson fight right now in the sixth round. 251, 250, 249 of the sixth round with Shakur Stevenson versus Edwin de Los Santos. So here we go. 240, 239, 238, 237 of the sixth round. Still the same. Dodging all these shots. And here we go up in the clinch. The referee breaks it up. 228, 227, 226. Here we go. He's got real good reflexes, according to Andre Ward, saying this about Shakur Stevenson. And lo and behold, he does. I mean, you see it, right? For him to be able to do these shots where he's jerking back and forth and being able to throw his jab at the same time. I mean, it's just absolutely brilliant. So, not only that, he's downloading the data. He has all the athleticism to move back and forth and be able to also get a counter shot, which I think ultimately is what Shakur Stevenson is waiting for here to really get on um, Los Santos here with a counter shot, sort of like this cross that Floyd does with his Philly shell, right? Where he sort of throws it at you the minute you miss, and then he counters you with that shot. And that's sort of what Shakur Stevenson is looking for right now. So 127, 126, 125 of the sixth round. So here we go. So far, it's been a shutout for Shakur Stevenson. The sixth round, you hear with 115 left, you can argue that he won this one as well. I don't see why not. I mean, sometimes it's sort of hard to give a shutout to someone because you say to yourself, wow, is this guy really beating him all these rounds? And sometimes you just have to admit and say yes. You look at the reflexes that Shakur Stevenson has right now. I think he is coming really alive right now, and I wouldn't be surprised if he starts hitting him with harder shots, especially on the counter exchanges. So with 45 seconds left, I'm definitely giving this to Shakur Stevenson on this end right here. Round six for Shakur. So it's complete shutout for the most part. And then we have 23 seconds left into the round. And then in between that, we're going to talk about the upcoming cards for the UFC. 14 seconds left, 12 seconds, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Yeah, I'm giving this to Shakur Stevenson on this one. Even though the round hasn't finished yet, it's quite clear that he is the shutout winner for this one. So that's it right there. So on that same card with Beneil Dariush and Arman Tsarukyan, by the way, for those of you that don't know, Arman Tsarukyan came into the UFC back in UFC Moscow in 2019. That was when the UFC was even allowed to host fights in Moscow, but now obviously the political climate makes that a little bit different. Well, he debuted against Islam Makhachev, and here he is now tearing through the lightweight division, trying to get a rank, taking on Beneil Dariush, who was close to getting a title. So him winning this fight would absolutely put him up there quickly. And then here comes the co-main event. Real good one. How about Dan Hooker taking on Bobby Green? Now, this right here is a great matchup, great for the hardcores. Not only that, this is going to be on December 2nd after this coming week, where you're not going to have a UFC for the next couple of weeks. So something to look forward to. Now, we are heading past halfway into the fight. We are now in the seventh round, which of course Stevenson 259, 258, 257, 254, 253 of the seventh round. And once again, going for the jab, just leads with the jab. Now, I see exactly why Andre Ward really emphasizes a lot on telling the fighters, hey, listen, don't get bored with the jab. This is your bread and butter. Sometimes it's very easy to want to stop throwing the jab. You want to throw the hook right away. You want to throw the uppercut. Sometimes it's there. But the jab really is what helps close the distance and gauge away at the distance while giving you time to download your data within that range. And brilliantly, Shakur Stevenson is executing that to the T. So here we go. Now they're standing in the middle of the ring. Oh, there it is. He slips that shot. Another slip. Wow. Really good defense on Shakur Stevenson here. Very slick in his head movement and his back and forth motion. We are at 155, 154, 153, 152 of the seventh round, 150, 149, 148, 147, 146. Edwin doesn't seem to have any answers for Shakur Stevenson. He hasn't really landed a real clean shot for us to say, hey, you know what? There's something to this fight, right? There's something to this guy. And yeah, we just don't see that right now. We're not seeing any of that with Edwin, unfortunately. Here goes Shakur Stevenson now. Okay, now they're up in the clinch. 120, 119, 118, 117, 116, 115 of the seventh round. So as we are dwindling down with 1 minute left into this particular card, obviously, Shakur Stevenson is leading the dance, leading the way. After the 60 seconds, if De Los Santos is not going to change anything or knock him down, I'm going to give this round once again to Shakur Stevenson with another 7-0 shutout. Now here comes Rob Font against Davison. That's going to be in the same card as Dan Hooker, Bobby Green, Beneil Dariush, and Arman Tsarukyan, as we are heading into the last 35 seconds of the Shakur Stevenson fight with De Los Santos in the seventh round, rather. So, yeah, great UFC card coming up for December 2nd. Obviously, that's going to be way after the November 18th card this coming week. Rob Font is in that card, as I mentioned, against Davison Figueroa. Underneath that is Sean Brady taking on Kelvin Gastelum. Can you imagine? That is the fourth to the last fight of the entire card, not even the co-main event. Obviously, they felt Dan Hooker and Bobby Green was more of a worthy co-main, but Kelvin Gastelum has been going down. Obviously, that one loss that Sean Brady had against Bilal Muhammad. Yeah, so with that round, I'm going to give that to Shakur Stevenson again for the seventh round. Once again, it's very hard to give a score to somebody that like that, but yeah, what can you do? That is the seventh round for Shakur Stevenson. Now back to the UFC card that we have, right, for this coming week. Well, let's get back to that, but because the eighth round is about to start, so let's keep covering that. But yeah, we're gonna leave off from the Punel Soriano versus Dustin Saltoff fight, and then obviously Khalil Roundtree has a fight against the light heavyweight 5'8" Russian Asmat. So here we go, the eighth round for the Shakur Stevenson fight against Dos Santos. By the way, my scorecards right now, I have it 7-0 for Shakur Stevenson. If you guys have a different score, please let me know. I have yet to see a round where Dos Santos, I'm sorry, De Los Santos, sorry, a little bit of a tongue twister. But yeah, he hasn't won any of these rounds. Now, Shakur Stevenson just downloaded his entire data for the entirety of a seventh round period. And here it is. It's just no answer from Edwin whatsoever. Every time he tries to throw a shot, uh, Shakur Stevenson brilliantly moves his head side to side or back and forth, up and down motion. And there's just nothing that he can answer towards. And the same thing here, right? It seems that now we're probably going to get to a stage where at some point Los Santos is going to get frustrated and probably become very hesitant with his shots. Look, there's only so much that you can miss from a particular fighter, right? Where you just start becoming hesitant, but he's here just throwing volume after volume, but to no avail. 143, 142, 141 of the eighth round. And so far, Shakur Stevenson could lose the entire fight from here on. When it comes to rounds and points, he would still win this fight right now. Let me know what you guys think. If you have a different opinion, write on the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let me know what you guys think. And here we are, 120, 119, 118 of the eighth round. Still no answer for Edwin. Yeah, so now here's the thing that I wonder, right? Since we're in the Las Vegas area watching this fight, will UFC 300 be in Las Vegas? We'll find out, right? More than likely it should be, but who knows? So here we go, 51 seconds in the eighth round, 49, 48. And who do you give this one to? Oh, man, I got to say, this is a Stevenson round again. There it is, a clean jab by Stevenson right there. Now with Los Santos, he hasn't landed a single clean shot yet to Stevenson. And I mean, I wonder, I mean, look, we there's no need to wonder. He has a great defense. I mean, he's got that Floyd Mayweather style of head movement and being able to duck and dodge, and he does it so brilliantly. But again, also another thing that I mentioned earlier in this particular reaction video or this live stream that I'm doing was that the most elite boxers, what they are really good at doing is downloading your data, right? And so far, Shakur Stevenson is in the optimal state of arousal right now where everything is intact. Round 8, 10-9. I'm going to give 10-9 to Stevenson. Shakur round 8. So giving you guys a live scorecard as we are going on right now. So this isn't a complete shutout. Let me know if you guys think there's any other score other than a complete shutout right now. It is completely 8-0 for Shakur Stevenson at the moment. Look at the replay right now. He's hitting him with some crisp jabs. He's just hitting him with jabs all day long. And once again, this is why Andre Ward emphasizes that this is some of the most important punch that you can really learn in boxing. I mean, literally, Shakur Stevenson is winning this whole entire fight with just that alone. So here we go. Now we are heading into the ninth round as we are slowly closing out this fight. Complete shutout for Stevenson. The jabs he's landed 30 for Stevenson and 16 total for Dos Santos. So Los Santos, sorry, keep mixing up his name with Dos Santos. He's not Brazilian. He's actually a Dominican fighter, and as you know, it's a big region down there for boxing. Cuba, the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, where the Paul brothers train, among many other top boxers before, such as Trinidad. But yeah, and Shakur Stevenson, half Puerto Rican himself as well. So straight out of Newark, New Jersey from Brick City. Here we go. Boom. Now he's actually throwing a hook this time. So now this is what I mean when I said that he's sort of downloading the data for the entire fight, right? He was throwing some jabs. He was trying to lure him to coming in. Mark Riggle has this 79, 73. He gave what round now? The fifth round to Dos Santos. Yeah, I don't know about that. I think he's just being generous. So he gives the fifth round to Dos Santos, to Los Santos. I don't. Obviously, I have this as a complete shutout. So the ninth round doesn't seem any different. See, the thing is also another thing that a lot of elite boxers like to do as we are watching 139, 138, 137 of the ninth round. One of the most elite things that these guys really know how to do is that they know how to shed rounds, meaning that they can give up a round just so they can become successful later down the road with the different rounds, right? And now, obviously, maybe that's where the 10-9 scorecard for Mark in ESPN gave to Los Santos was probably on that end. But again, I just think he's being generous. This is a complete shutout for Shakur Stevenson. There really hasn't been any real clean punches towards him. If anything, a lot of these punches are either hit into his shoulders from the shoulder roll or just from the parry or just, yeah, non existent whatsoever. So here we are 45 seconds, 44, 43, 42, 41, 40, 39 of the ninth round, which, by the way, I will shamelessly give to Shakur Stevenson on this one. Once again, 35 seconds. Unless, of course, he knocks him down, then I have to change my scorecard on that. But yeah, again, a complete shutout for Shakur Stevenson. This is just one of those fights. Oh, what was that? I think he had an accidental elbow there within a close range shot they're showing in the replay. So 19 seconds left, 18, 17, 16, 15. Round Shakur for round 9. I give this one to round 9 for Shakur Stevenson. There it is. So back to the UFC as we concentrate on this fight as well as we go back and forth. So what kind of matches do we have for the UFC? Obviously, Punal Soriano taking on Dustin Soltov, as I was mentioning, Khalil Roundtree. Now, this is an interesting matchup. How about this? This is another prospect right here that I think people should be really interested in. He's a 5'8", 205er fighting out of Dagestan or Chechnya. Obviously, you know a lot about those places and what they're good at. They're great at wrestling. His height, which is a disadvantage in the striking department, he more than makes up for in his power. And not only that, the wrestling exchanges where he can close the distance. Speaking of closing the distance, Edwin has yet to close any distance towards Shakur Stevenson here. And we are looking at a potential shutout with the 10th, 11th, and 12th round for him to make a decision. In order for him to win, guess what? He has to go and knock Stevenson out at this point. And Stevenson could wow us with an even better performance by potentially finishing this guy within the next couple of championship rounds that we are witnessing right now. So 250, 249, 248, 247 of the 10th round. And Shakur Stevenson still is in the same type of tempo, same type of rate. Hasn't really increased his speed more or less, just stayed right about the same. And once again, I think it's the best way to really preserve your cardio. But not only that, it's a way to really show that you know what you're doing in there, being able to be relaxed, being able to see the shots coming. And once again, that word that I had mentioned earlier, the optimal state of arousal, which is where Shakur Stevenson is at right now. And he is just in an absolute flow state to which I don't see a pattern breaking in between this round, the next round, and the finishing of the fight as the rounds continue to dwindle down into the 12th, as we are here in the 10th round, 152, 151, 149 of the 10th round. So here we go. He goes for a hook, misses. He goes for a jab. At this stage right now, I think Shakur Stevenson could turn it up if he wants, but then at the same time, there is that risk management factor of, well, how much are you going to give up in terms of, well, the vulnerabilities that you could present to Edwin and the openings that you could give him as this fight goes on. But here we go. So he misses with that one. Let's see. Yeah, this one, it's hard for me to give this one to Edwin also, right? Again, don't be shy to shut somebody out if that's literally how you see the whole entire fight, right? What was that fight where everyone said that it was a complete shutout? Was that what was that fight? It was just a recent fight that had gone on. I think it was one of Canelo's fights where he went 12 rounds where he just completely no, 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 it wasn't that. What there was, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of 12 round boxing matches out there that are a complete shutout. But sometimes if you have two guys that are somewhat heavy favorites or fan favorites, rather, sometimes it's very hard to just score a shutout for someone like that. And same thing with the Errol Spence fight, right? Like, I think that entire fight was a shutout in and of itself. There wasn't a single moment where, or I mean, not a single moment, but rather a single round. And that is the end of the 10th round right there, which I'm going to give to Shakur Stevenson. So, yeah, there wasn't a single round there where you could really feel confident for Errol Spence when he took on Crawford. So, 10th round for Shakur right there. Again, a shutout. So, I don't know if a scorecard is useful at this point, right? Because if you have the scorecards the way that I did, obviously you're going to give this all to Shakur Stevenson with 2 rounds left, and here we are. So, what else is in this UFC card for the December 2nd card? Because we went over the main cards, or at least portion of the main cards. Khalil Roundtree, obviously a much improved fighter from over the years. So, in the prelims card of that December 2nd fight, how about this? Misha Tate is in that card against Julia Avila. Clay Guida is also in that card against Joaquim Silva. We'll go over that in just a second. But now here we are in the 11th round of the championship fights for the WBC 130-pound championship of the world. Shakur Stevenson taking on D. Los Santos. Here we go. 245, 244, 243 of the 11th round. So at this point, Shakur Stevenson can either cruise or he can go on overdrive and try to go for the finish, which can present a certain inherent risk, which I don't see him really motivated to do right now because he's fighting in one particular tempo. Every time Edwin tries to come in, he backs up geniusly. Every time they are in within the pocket, he is able to slip the shots. He's just great everywhere right now, right? Especially in the range department, right? Not so much in the close range department or in the inside, not in a way where, let's say, he throws huge body shots like the way Canelo does, or does it Mexican style where he tries to dig at you from the inside. He's just fighting from a distance brilliantly, mind you, with 144, 143, 142 of the 11th round of this contest. So 2 rounds left, And it's just so quickly how these fights just uh dwindle down, right? Look, here's the thing about boxing, right? Speaking from an MMA perspective, as we are dwindling down 124, 123, 122, 120. Usually, when you watch a boxing card, there's usually some fights in the boxing card in the undercard where you just really don't pay attention. Some of them are 12-round fights. And if you really don't care about the fighter, you're not as engaged. But with this one, because, well, like many of us are strong supporters of Shakur Stevenson, especially if you're from New Jersey, you're sort of invested a little bit more where you see a little bit of everything of what is going on. And like what I'm doing right now, you're able to score this fight as it goes on. And once again, another shutout for Shakur Stevenson as we dwindle down with 42 seconds left of the 11th round of this championship WBC lightweight fight. So Edwin uh, seems to have tried a little bit of everything with his arsenal. He threw jabs. He constantly threw a lot of jabs, missed. He tries to throw some inside shots to no avail. He tries to throw some hooks, uppercuts, just nothing. He's not presenting any danger towards Shakur Stevenson in any kind of way. And again, every time he tries to move forward towards Shakur Stevenson, he backs away. And while he's doing that, Shakur Stevenson is moving forward on him as the fight goes on, right? It's just there's nothing he can do in any exchange, whether it's close range or far range. There's just nothing that he can do. So 11th round, we'll have to give to 11th round. We will give to Shakur Stevenson. So Edwin is in a do or die situation right here, guys. He either has to really put it on Shakur Stevenson right now or just absolutely gets demolished by the points and scorecards. So there's a shot of Shakur's family in the ringside, and we are now facing the 12th and final round of this championship fight. So here we go, the final round of the championship. By the way, guys, after this fight, I will go over some UFC cards as I'm already doing that in the middle of these rounds, but we'll talk more UFC and more drama in the boxing world and also all the wonderful matchmaking that the Saudis have been able to make and also the future matchups that they're going to make as a result of their December 23rd fight, but also the other matchups that they can create out of the Tyson Fury versus Usyk fight alone. Like, for example, if Usyk wins that fight, or if Fury wins that fight, either one, there's a rematch clause in between that. Yeah, they're not going to give a rematch clause to Francis Ngannou. They escaped that one straight away, and they're not going to try to even attempt anything at it. So here we go. 2 minutes left in the final 12th round of Stevenson versus De Los Santos. Yeah, just 1-2 combinations. He's been hitting him all night, but mostly with the jab. I mean, this is exactly what I had mentioned over and over again with Andre Ward's emphasis on jabs. Even George St. Pierre in the MMA world, he was very instrumental in using his jab and then setting it up for other, let's say, takedown attempts, maybe even set it up with some kicks, some Superman punches along the way. He used the jab for everything. And obviously, in boxing, the jab is the key to everything. It's definitely the key to your range as we are dwindling down the last 69 seconds of this fight. 65, 64, 63, 62, 61. The last 60 seconds of this contest. So here we go. Yep. This is a shutout. Definitely a shutout for Shakur Stevenson in this one right here. 28 seconds left of this fight. Yeah, this is dunzo for Edwin right here. This right here is a fight for Shakur Stevenson, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. He took this fight and won this fight right here. So big shout outs and congratulations to Shakur Stevenson. 12-round shutout. That's what I'm going to say. 12-round shutout for this one. So Shakur wins this one. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of criticisms. They're going to come into play with this particular fight. They're going to say, well, why didn't he finish him? This and that. But again, like with everything else, whenever a guy gets criticized for not finishing anybody, you always have to remember, whenever some of these guys like Edwin, guys like Gilbert Burns, who took on Khamzat Chimaev, guys who took on Khamzat Chimaev like Usman, right? These guys are going in there for the fight of their life, right? So, of course, it is no wonder that, hey, they're going to go into a decision with some of the toughest fighters in the world, such as these guys, because guess what? They're going to fight very careful and they're going to train very hard at it. So now we're just waiting for the decision for Shakur Stevenson versus Edwin, which, by the way, they're going to give straight away for Shakur Stevenson. He is a home fighter for this one. He is the guy that, well, pretty much they built this whole entire show around him. So here we are. So before we go on, I'm gonna play this video for you guys as we're waiting for the decision. This was a reaction that I did for John Kavanagh, right? He did an interview with Ariel Helwani this week. And, well, let me show you guys this video. It's quite a good life lesson in terms of what you need to learn when it comes to mixed martial arts and the insides of the sport. And also just a dive look into the amateur system of mixed martial arts. As you guys know, the amateur system in MMA is not really as present and doesn't really have the historical background the way that boxing does. But obviously, with organizations like the IMMAF, which is an international amateur organization, which, by the way, Makayev has dominated in, which got him into the regional scenes of the Middle East, such as Bahrain and Brave FC, and now getting into the UFC. John Kavanagh is also a big instrumental proponent in that particular organization. So let me show you guys this video just right before they announce the winner for Edwin versus Shakur Stevenson, which we all know is Shakur Stevenson. But either way, check this one out. Watching the MMA Hour with Ariel Helwani, courtesy of MMAfighting.com. And just a few minutes ago, they had John Kavanagh as a live guest in the studio, and I wanted to give a little reaction to that. Reason why is because I think John Kavanagh doesn't get enough credit in terms of being a coach and in terms of how serious he takes coaching in MMA, just simply because, you know what? His fighter, Conor McGregor, one of his most famous students of all time, if not ever, is considered to be the metaphor of the guy that is not serious MMA. In other words, if you ask a casual fan who their favorite fighter is, and they say Conor McGregor, guess what? Automatically in your mind, you think this guy is a casual. Just like if you're a soccer fan, a real hardcore soccer fan, and you say something to the extent that Ronaldo or David Beckham or Messi even is your favorite player. Not so much Messi, because Messi is in his prime right now, and you can't say that about, let's say, David Beckham or Ronaldo. So if you say Messi, you look more like a smart, informed fan. Whereas with the world of mixed martial arts, you mention Conor McGregor, you sound like the dumbest guy in the room. And I hate to really make it sound so brutally honest as that. That's just the reality of it. No one's going to respect you straight away because of the fact that Conor McGregor is synonymous with trash talking. He's synonymous with outrageous behavior. And even though he doesn't fake any of these things like Colby Covington or even Henry Cejudo, it's
attached to his persona in some kind of way. So it's very difficult to take anybody seriously that is associated with Conor McGregor or anybody that full hand supports him in any kind of way. So in comes John Kavanagh, a guy who was a former mixed martial arts fighter himself, a guy who is, by the way, the first ever jiu-jitsu black belt in Ireland. So this is quite an important thing to really bring up. Another thing that's important to bring up is his work that he does in the world of amateur MMA. And by the way, this is really the pinpoint narrative and the pinpoint thesis that I want to bring up to you is his work in amateur mixed martial arts. Because he said something very important that I think a lot of people need to really hear, which is what? He says that he loves amateur mixed martial arts. And by the way, keep in mind, this is the coach of none other than the notorious Conor McGregor. Keep this in mind as I'm saying this, as I repeat to you, not so much verbatim, but somewhere to that close extent of the things that he said about amateur MMA. He says he loves it because there's no politics involved. He says that if you win, you advance to the next level. He loves the Olympic architecture surrounding the IMMAF organization that is held in Bahrain. An organization, by the way, with the likes of Muhammad Makayev has been platformed in and dominated in and has given the right amount of practice for him to get ready for the pros. Now, this is the side of mixed martial arts that a lot of people don't see. Obviously, you're going to see the glamour side of mixed martial arts. You're going to see the presentation of the videos, the beef that is going on, the storyline, the drama that is all attached to it. But what you don't see is the amateur ranks that gets a lot of the pros there. And more importantly, he even mentioned something to the extent, you know what? These guys can just fight in the amateur world, not have to worry about selling tickets. They don't have to worry about promoting themselves or any of this nonsense that goes into the entertainment portion of mixed martial arts. And then they can go on about their lives, have normal jobs such as a school teacher, a policeman, an engineer, a doctor, a nurse, or anything in between. So, again, what we are seeing out of John Kavanagh is the real John Kavanagh outside of all the glamour and fame that is attached to Conor McGregor. And I think this is very interesting to bring up. I think this is very fascinating to understand. And not only that, I think that this right here is an eye-opening interview that I think everybody needs to see. For one, you got to understand a few things, right? What it means to be a coach. Let's just put John Kavanagh to the side for a second. I know this video title is going to be about him, but let's talk about what a lot of MMA coaches go through. You have a big fighter, big name, big event. He wins on Saturday, like the likes of, let's say, Tom Aspinall, right? I know that he's not coached by John Kavanagh, but I'm just giving you sort of a scenario of what John Kavanagh, Faraz Zahabi, and Tim Welsh, and all these other top coaches in the MMA game right now go through. Not so much Tim Welsh, because I think that he's exclusively only training Sean O'Malley. So if Sean O'Malley wins and he's done with the fight, he's going to be hanging out with Sean O'Malley and not going to, let's say, another fighter, not going to another match that they have to be held in the next coming weeks or so, right? Because this is exactly what John Kavanagh is describing. He has this big event, he's done with it, but he has to worry about coaching the next guy for the next week. So it is an absolute roller coaster ride. He also mentions that he can't be too hyper about the wins in terms of happiness, and he can't be too sad about the losses. So he has to keep his emotions somewhere in between. And I think this is really important for a lot of MMA fans to understand, because when it's 1 a.m. in the middle of the night and everybody goes home after the press conference, these guys either have to deal with these fighters and the craziness that they're going to be impending upon themselves on, let's say, their night of celebration. On the other side of that, they have to worry about the fighter who gets knocked out, gets sent to the hospital, and then having to do that ambulance ride from the arena to the hospital as they worry about their fighter that they put in there in extremely dangerous situations, or sometimes situations that they never saw coming, such as a head kick knockout or a devastating TKO, or maybe even a bad submission to where they got their limbs broken, or perhaps maybe got put to sleep in a long period of time that they shouldn't have, that caused some sort of serious bodily injury. So these are some of the things that you have to worry about as a coach of a professional fighter in the unpredictable world of MMA.
So if you guys want to check out the rest of that particular card, or I'm sorry, the rest of that particular content, uh, check out the underrated life purpose of John Kavanagh, Conor McGregor's MMA BJJ coach, the MMA Hour reaction to his interview with Ariel Helwani. So I thought that was really interesting to bring up, considering that it gives you a bit of some insights on what's going on in the sport. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, take a look at that particular content. And let's go over some UFC fights now that we have gone over the Shakur Stevenson fight. So here are some interesting fights. As I mentioned earlier, obviously Misha Tate now trying to stay active, taking on Julia Avila. You have Clay Guida, longtime veteran of the sport, now taking on Joaquim Silva. Then you have Zachary Reese, upcoming middleweight prospect, 6-0, taking on Cody Grunbridge. How about Jakar Close? This guy was the guy who I believe when he took on Jeremy Stevens, he got shoved and got shoved so hard that he ended up getting injured. So, yeah, obviously we know where Stevenson is now. Jeremy Stevens, he was in that celebrity boxing match with Jose Aldo, but yeah, that's neither here or there. And then here's Jakar Close still fighting in the UFC. Steve Garcia taking on Melquizel Costa. Rodolfo Bellato taking on Ihor Porchea. Wellington Thurman taking on Jared Gooden. Veronica Machado, who I believe this is this is Dan Hardy's significant other. Okay, taking on Jamie Lynn Hort. So right after that, the next coming week, you obviously have Song Yadong and Chris Gutierrez. Now they are the main event. There's not so much depth in terms of what is going to be the main event or co-main event. That's a month away, and they still don't have that card filled up. Obviously, a lot of these guys that are going to be filled up in that card, guess what? They are on short notice. And by the way, this is a 4 a.m. card, so I would imagine maybe this is going to be a card that they're going to be held in China in December 9th. So yeah, something to look out. And then after that, obviously a week after that, you have Leon Edwards taking on Colby Covington for the 170-pound strap, which is going to take place in Las Vegas. Alexander Pantoja taking on Brandon Royval. Now, that's a great matchup considering that Alexander Pantoja had that big win in UFC 290 against Brendan Moreno in International Fight Week, right? So now here he is coming back to defend his title. That should be interesting. Shavkat Rakhmonov taking on Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, which, by the way, is a real great striking matchup, but Shavkat Rakhmonov is also very well-rounded, so that's going to be interesting. Now, how about Tony Ferguson against Paddy Pimblett? By the way, I'm going to make a separate video on that, talking about his experience training with David Goggins. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it inconducive to what he's trying to do? I'm going to give you the insights of all that, especially with how military training transfers into the world of MMA, if that helps at all. Now, obviously, Paddy Pimblett, if you look at in his YouTube video, there was a few times where he did train with the U.S. Marines down in San Diego, which, by the way, a lot of those guys in the PT physical training workouts all smoked Paddy because Paddy was literally in his fat stage after, let's say, a big fight that he had going on, and then he's just sort of chilling in between. But in the grappling exchanges that he did with the Marines, he obviously manhandled all of them and choked them out. But Paddy does what Paddy does. He's a pro fighter. He's supposed to do that. A great submission artist at that, especially when they were just grappling on the, sparring on the grappling end. And these guys are trained shooters and not trained fighters. So that's what you have in that situation. And then you have Vicente Luque taking on Ian Gary, which is a big step up for Ian Gary. Obviously, he's been able to move up the ranks of, let's say, the top 20 or the top 30 of the 170 division, beating the likes of Rodriguez, then beating the likes of Neil Magny with a 3-round decision. Now here he is in an action-packed fight with one of the most violent fighters out there in the 170 division, which is Vicente Luque. That's going to be a great matchup. What are some prelims we have for this one? Alonzo Minfield taking on Justin Jacoby. Martin Bidet taking on Shamil Gaziev, 11-0 heavyweight. That should be really interesting. Heavyweight Dagestani. Tagir Ulbankedov taking on Cody Durden. By the way, Cody has had a fight against Muhammad Makayev. Now here he is taking on the 14-2 Dagestani. Randy Brown taking on Muslim Salikov, a match which, by the way, he had announced in the Michael Bisping podcast during the week of UFC 295. And here it is coming to fruition. What's in the other prelims here? Josh Emmett, our very own Sacramento's own Josh Emmett, taking on Giga Chikazi. That's going to be great. I'm probably going to do another preview on that right in front of the Golden One Arena to commemorate Josh Emmett's Sacramento residency, born and raised out here. We're going to give a little nice story on that. Irene Aldana taking on Carol Rosa. Cody Garbrandt, how about this? Taking on Brian Kelleher. This is a really interesting matchup considering that, well, even though Cody is a former world champion and Brian Kelleher is somewhat of a journeyman, guess what? Right now, at this particular moment of time, this is a 50-50 matchup between these two. So Casey O'Neill taking on Ariane Lipsky, and that is UFC 296. Obviously, I've gone over UFC 297, 298. Let me show you guys a video that I did on those particular matchups. And don't forget to like and subscribe. We will continue on with the coverage of post-fight Shakur Stevenson and Edwin De Los Santos. Let's talk about that. But before that, let's take a look at the other cards that is coming up for the past UFC 297. So let's take a look at that. This video is called, what is this called? This is called UFC Meritocracy or Marketing Machine, which basically talks about the fights that are coming up for UFC 297, 298, and 299. Enjoy. I will be right back, and we will talk more boxing and MMA.
So Sean O'Malley now has a chance of redemption from the only loss that he's ever taken in his whole entire career. By the way, in full context, a fight that he was winning up until he suffered an injury. Now you have Dricus du Plessis taking on Sean O'Malley, which, by the way, is quite an interesting matchup, but also a very interesting turn of events for multiple reasons. Well, number one, you have this situation going on with Israel Adesanya, who picked Dricus du Plessis out of nowhere to become the number one contender, and all he needed to do was beat Robert Whittaker at UFC 290. Not a very tough task, is it? At least not at the time in a way that people thought. Let's face it, at the time, we just really didn't think that there was anybody that was going to beat Robert Whittaker other than Israel Adesanya. And the second time around that Robert Whittaker took on Israel Adesanya, unarguably, many people had him winning that entire fight. So here we are, Sean Strickland gets called in because Sydney, Australia and UFC 293 needed a card. And guess what? They decided they were going to give it to Sean Strickland because he was the man that was available. He was the man that was ready, and he was the man that raised his hand and answered the call to combat and got rewarded heavily for his spoils of war in the biggest spoil of them all, which is what? The undisputed 185 championship. So now in comes Dricus du Plessis, who got sideswiped from that whole entire deal because he was supposed to be the guaranteed man that was supposed to take on Israel Adesanya. But Israel Adesanya wanted to stay active, the UFC wanted Israel Adesanya in a big card in Sydney, which, by the way, is literally his home country. So here we are. Israel Adesanya ends up losing that fight. And because of that, he ends up, well, going away for a little bit. And now here comes Sean Strickland trying to do exactly what Izzy did, staying active while being a champion. He won that back in, when was that? September? So now we're heading into January when that card is going to be taking place. Then you have, after that, Sean Strickland and Dricus du Plessis. You have, what do you have in February? Ilya Topuria taking on Alexander Volkanovski. To be quite honest with you, I don't like that fight for Alexander Volkanovski. I don't like that fight for the 145 division altogether, and I'm going to tell you why. We're not getting Volk at his 100%. Can you agree with that? Yes or no? Right on the comment section below. The one thing you also got to understand is that you're taking on a Volkanovski that is badly damaged. So that has to take into consideration what a lot of factors are going into this. So is Ilya Topuria the heavy favorite going into this fight? Well, I'm not an odds maker. I don't even bet. I don't even make these videos to encourage people to bet in any kind of way. But I would imagine if you're talking about odds and favorites and underdogs, I would not be surprised if they gave Ilya Topuria as the favorite and Alexander Volkanovski as the underdog because of the fact that, well, he's 35 years old at the 145-pound division, which statistically is very difficult to manage at an older age. Whereas if you're a heavyweight at that age, you don't got to worry about weight cutting. You don't have to worry about depleting yourself because the older that you get, the harder it is to deplete yourself down to a certain weight category. So these are factors that Alexander has to really look out for. On top of that, you got to understand Ilya Topuria is a quintessential modern mixed martial arts fighter that knows how to do a little bit of everything. And then on top of that, he comes from a very exotic place, such as Spain, a place that, by the way, the UFC wants to get a hold of in a certain market in Europe. And then on top of that, it's a great way to promote Ilya Topuria as this Vega Street Fighter character. You guys remember Vega from Street Fighter. You can easily see how the UFC would market him as that, because if you ever played Street Fighter when you're a kid in the 90s, you realize that one of the biggest goals that Street Fighter was trying to create in their own world is a diverse group of characters and martial artists from around the world. And guess what? You have that with the UFC. You have a talent pool full of guys that come from very interesting places, guys that have political implications in the regions that they come from. And then on top of that, guys that have a rich history in combat sports in whatever part of the world they come from. So Ilya Topuria is now the quintessential modern mixed martial artist in that aspect. And not to mention the fact that the guy can strike, the guy can wrestle, the guy can submit you. He can do everything. He's very well-rounded, which essentially is really what you need to become an undisputed champion in the UFC. You have to be very well-rounded, but even more well-rounded if you want to keep your title and defend it multiple times with the likes of George St. Pierre, Anderson Silva, John Jones still doing it in the current moment of time, and maybe even the likes of Dominic Cruz in his prime days. And then the list goes on. Now, Islam Makhachev is sort of following into that particular part of legacy and lineage of beating top names. And now, how about the fact that he is now the number one pound-for-pound guy in the world? Which, by the way, you can call me a conspiracy theorist. Again, I'm willing to disclose that it's only my opinion, and it's no hard evidence to say in this matter, but for entertainment's sake, I'm going to just say this. I think that Ilya Tapora and uh, Alexander Volkanovski, the reason why this fight is happening is because of the fact that they are bullying Alexander into this fight. And again, I'm very hesitant to say this because I have no proof. But follow me on this, okay? They take Alexander Volkanovski out of the number one pound for pound ranking, and rightfully so, because guess what? He already lost twice to the guy that is currently holding the number one pound for pound. Well, I don't know if you call it a title or ranking or whatever, but the number one pound for pound guy right now is Islam. And they figured, you know what? How do we get Alexander to fight in a card that we need to fill up, especially with a championship fight that needs to be met in a certain time and date to be determined? So they decided, you know what? We're going to take you out of the number one spot. We're going to put Islam in there, and we're going to motivate you to come back and try to fight for it again. And it's a genius move because guess what? You need to fill in these fights. You're not going to get Conor McGregor anytime soon. Maybe you will in the second part or the second quarter of 2024. But from the announcements that have been made, it doesn't seem like you're going to get him from the winter to springtime. Maybe even the summer, and maybe even the fall, and maybe even the latter stages of 2024 as the year closes on next year or so. So that's a possibility that's the reason why they took him out of the spot. But again, this is the reason why I'm very hesitant to say this, because it's a conspiracy theory. I don't have legitimate proof of the matter at hand, but at the same time, it's not like Islam didn't earn to have the number one spot. And rightfully so, he earned to be the number one pound for pound guy, because to be the man, you have to beat the man, and he did exactly that. So now moving on, what is the next fight after that? You have Ilya Tapora versus Alexander Volkanovski, and then you have Chito Vera taking on Sean O'Malley in March. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they're trying to fill up a March card in Saudi Arabia. And I think that's going to be great for Sean O'Malley's brand if he was to win this fight. Imagine he wins the card of a Saudi pay-per-view opener. And then lo and behold, he beats the guy that really has a win over him. And it's the only guy that has a win over Sean O'Malley, and avenges it in a great storyline. Or Chito Vera could very well be the dark horse of the 135 division that we've always known him to be, and pulls off a Michael Bisping, Sean Strickland type of performance where he proves that he is the number one guy in that particular spot. So what else do we have? Obviously, Dricus du Plessis taking on Sean Strickland. That right there, I think it's great for the sport of MMA in a sense of the hardcore space to have that fight. Why? Because we have what you call a higher sense of meritocracy now in the game of MMA. Now, at first, we really didn't think that Dricus du Plessis deserved to even have a Robert Whittaker fight. But of course, we never believe anybody deserves anything until we give them a shot, and then they blow us off the waters with the performance that they pull off, like Francis Ngannou in that boxing match with Tyson Fury, just to name a few great examples of that matter at hand. So now you have two guys that have a great forward motion when it comes to fighting, meaning that they don't back down. They're going to march forward. They don't take a back step. You're going to see wars going on in this fight. But in reality, Sean Strickland is the much more crisp boxer, much more technical fighter overall, has a better understanding of his range, And I think all of these attributes that has led Sean Strickland into the championship will only make him better as a defending champion. And by knowing that, he's going to come up with his best A game to take on Dricus du Plessis, who, by the way, is not the most technical guy out there. Okay? In other words, a lot of the technique that he does, it looks ugly, but it works. For example, he was able to take down Robert Whittaker with a headlock. Here you have longtime wrestler, Cuban Olympic wrestler, Yoel Romero taking on Robert Whittaker, can't even get him down for an entire 5-round fight. And yet here's this South African who doesn't have great wrestling in his country, but has great genetics, great strength, great overall power in order to do what it is that he wants to do and compensate for the mistakes that he makes in the octagon. Which, by the way, really creates an extremely compelling fight. Now, why is that such a compelling fight? Because one guy is highly technical and the other guy is highly unpredictable. And if you really want to count those matters at hand, Sean Strickland is also a very unpredictable fighter, which means that you don't know what kind of Sean Strickland you're going to get out of this, for better or worse. Meaning that the Sean Strickland that could show up in this fight could be the Sean Strickland that showed up for the El-Kheer fight. The Sean Strickland that could show up in this fight could very well be the top A-game level prime Sean Strickland that took on Israel Adesanya, probably one of the most dominant 185 champions in the current modern history of the UFC. So there's a lot of great matchups that we can look forward to in these main events that we're talking about. UFC 297, January. UFC 298, February. And in UFC 299 in March, which more than likely will take place in Saudi Arabia because they've already reserved a location for a March card in Saudi Arabia. Then again, I wouldn't be surprised if they decided to take this fight to England in the London O2 Arena. But at the same time, what better way for the Saudis to enter the mixed martial arts realm by hosting Sean O'Malley versus Chito Vera? A very underrated matchup in terms of hype, in terms of storyline, because of the fact that they've already fought each other. And it's the only guy that has ever beaten the current champ right now. So there's a lot of scores to be settled in this particular fight. And it takes place in Saudi Arabia, so you know that the Saudis are going to go all out with their production, their promotion, and not only that, their presentation to the world when they build this card around Chito Vera and Sean O'Malley. Now, with the Dricus du Plessis and Sean Strickland fight, that's going to take place in Toronto, Canada, which is interesting because none of these two guys are Canadians, right? But Canada, in and of itself, is a huge mixed martial arts fan, meaning that they're not like the English where, let's say, if you want to build an O2 Arena London UFC card, you got to have British fighters in there. In fact, you got to fill up the entire card with British.
So I wanted to just interject for a little bit there to talk about, obviously, because I had mentioned in that particular video about the Saudi card, right? Obviously, the Saudi card that's being built in a current moment of time is the Tyson Fury versus Alexander Usyk fight. So what's interesting about that particular fight is that, for one, this right here at first was a fight that never, ever would have been in anyone's imagination had Alexander Usyk not beaten Anthony Joshua. And by the way, it's just really how the game goes in terms of the competitive architecture that is involved in the sport, right? Because let's face it, as I was mentioning in one of my latest content that I did in one of the videos where I talk about the Tom Aspinall fight. Tom Aspinall literally inserted himself into a situation right now where now he is part of the Three Kings argument in the MMA division of the heavyweights. In other words, you have John Jones, who is the current champion, undisputed at that. Then you had the lineal champion, which was Francis Ngannou. And now you have Tom Aspinall, who is in the mix of this argument. And sort of in a weird way, this is kind of where we're at with this particular concept with the boxing aspect of things. There was a time where it was Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury, and AJ. Well, lo and behold, Tyson Fury fights uh, Deontay Wilder, knocks him out of the equation. Now it's just all about Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury, right? Wrong. He loses to Usyk, and we lose that fight. Now Anthony Joshua is in a different career trajectory. So just wanted to interject on that one for a little bit just to add on to this content, but more on the UFC's meritocracy or marketing machine as we preview the upcoming events of UFC 297, 298, 299, and beyond.
Just for the fans to engage. Now, that's not a knock on them in any kind of way, but I just think that perhaps in generalization sense, maybe the Canadians are much more of a hardcore fan base than, let's say, any other groups out there or any markets that the UFC goes to. So it works to have Sean Strickland and Dricus du Plessis as the main event. They have a great storyline on top of that. Not a great storyline, but you know what? It's great for the meritocracy of MMA because guess what? They were really going to take Dricus du Plessis out of this 185 deal. Guess who was supposed to be in there? Khamzat Chimaev. Now, for one reason or another, they just didn't want to do this fight. They felt that Dricus was the more formidable opponent, and maybe because of the injuries that Khamzat Chimaev is currently facing at the current moment of time. So I think that kind of plays a huge factor into this whole entire deal. Because if obviously it affected his performance going in there with Kamaru Usman, right or wrong, right? Because everybody was criticizing Khamzat Chimaev, who basically is the Tyson Fury in this situation. And by the way, check out the video that I made, Tyson Fury and Khamzat Chimaev, expectations of greatness, right? Because they were expecting that Khamzat Chimaev, the new prospect, upcoming star, was going to blow this former champion out the waters in a new weight class that he was trying to experiment in. In reality, a weight class both of them were experimenting in the world stage championship levels of the UFC. So he's out. So in comes Dricus. But they were really going to take Dricus out of that fight when many people out there truly believed that it was Dricus who deserved that title fight. But then at the same time, it kind of ruined a storyline that he had going on with Izzy. Because now you ask yourself, what does all that even mean? Izzy going into cage after he beat Robert Whittaker, dropping the N-bomb at him, making these crazy assumptions about Dricus du Plessis, saying that he's a racist, or at least playing the race card into it, which, by the way, really does build a fight in a very controversial way, but in a great way to put eyeballs in the world of the casuals that you want to attract to watch this sport on a random Saturday night. But now all of that is gone because of Sean Strickland. Because Sean Strickland spoiled the party for everybody. So now we have to really accept the fact that Sean Strickland is here to stay. He's either going to defend his championship or lose to a guy that we thought and always was the dark horse of the 185 division, and I'm talking about Dricus du Plessis, and finally meet his fate as becoming the undisputed 185 champion of the world. So those are some of the things that we can look forward to in that matchup. But once again, going back to the Ilia Topuria Alexander fight, I really don't rate this fight for Alexander Volkanovski. Everything is going against his favor. Everything is just going against him in a tide of just bad luck of going into this fight with Islam. Yes, getting paid, by the way, getting paid a great amount of money in order to step in there for Charles Oliveira, but in the end falling short and possibly taking even more damage in the latter stages of his career. And in comes Ilia Topuria, undefeated, 145 champion, at least for now contender, future champion potential in Ilia Topuria, and with a great market that's in front of him. Now, going back to that conspiracy that I was just talking about earlier, I would not be surprised if the UFC would prefer Ilia Topuria to win. Now, obviously, I'm just speaking out of speculation, right? Because the way that the UFC ethos goes about things is like, you know what? We're going to let the best fight the best, and we're not going to try to control any of the outcomes, regardless of any of the conspiracy theories out there with bad judging or perhaps mismatch type of scenarios of squash matches that they put on, like with Khamzat Chimaev and Kevin Holland, and maybe even the likes of Tony Ferguson possibly taking on somebody that was just way more advanced than what he can handle in his current state as, let's say, an older fighter at 155. So a lot of these things to really take into consideration, right? Because, again, Ilia Topuria has a market behind him that the UFC wants to take advantage of. So it should not be really anybody's surprise to find out that the UFC would rather have Ilia Topuria win. But obviously, the way that the UFC ethos goes about things, they want to tell you that, nah, it's not about the guy that we want to win or who is more marketable. It's about the best fighting the best and the guy beating the guy to go on and advance the guy that deserves it. In this case, Sean Strickland upsetting Israel Adesanya and now fighting the true number one contender in the first place, which is Dricus du Plessis. The wonderful aspect of meritocracy in mixed martial arts that sometimes is not the way that it is, or sometimes they make it seem like it is a place of meritocracy and guys getting what they deserve, but sometimes it's just really all about who is the most marketable guy that we're going to put in a headline, or a combination of all of those things mixed into what is the right decision at the right time, meaning that right now, is it the right time to put on Dricus du Plessis because he's the true number one contender? Yes. And that's only because Khamzat is injured. But is Khamzat really deserving of the 185 championship strap opportunity when he never really took on a true 185 contender? And Gerald Meerschaert doesn't count. And none of those other guys in his early preliminary stages of his UFC career really count in terms of high championship caliber contenders. Paulo Costa, a win over him would have absolutely solidified that, no doubt. But he got a win over Kamaru Usman, who, yes, is a former champion, but at the same time, a guy that truly is just starting out in a new division, just like Khamzat. And then you're going to give him a title shot based on that? So I can understand why a lot of people would have a problem with that. But then again, sometimes the UFC is a meritocracy. And sometimes the UFC is nothing more than an entertainment company where they're going to give the biggest names the best opportunities that's going to give them the most top revenue income that they can possibly make. And all decisions pointing out to those bases. So this is what we have right now. true meritocracy at its best with Dricus du Plessis and Sean Strickland. And who knows, maybe out of this fight, you can build stars out of it. Because the one thing that I always notice with MMA content and the things that everybody always chats about is that, oh, we want the more marketable guy to win. We want Sage Northcutt to win because if he does, then guess what? It's going to bring more eyeballs to the sport. We want Conor McGregor to win because he brings in more pay-per-view numbers. We want Israel Adesanya to win because of the same reason. Nobody ever says we want the best guy, the most deserving guy, the guy who wins at the right moment of time and earns their spot to win and, I guess, take all the gold and all the money, all the top pay, and all the top commercial and all the top advertisements that they can get. We want to give that to the winner. No one ever says that. They want to always cheer for their guy or cheer for the guy that everybody wants to cheer for. That's literally what most MMA content talks about. Oh, it would be more marketable if this guy wins. Nobody ever says, well, why don't we just have the most deserving guy take all the gold? Now we have that opportunity. That's literally the greatest example of the UFC having a meritocracy in its current moment of time with Dricus du Plessis and Sean Strickland. That is the example of when UFC is a meritocracy. An extreme opposition angle of that is, let's say if Tyson Fury was to come into the UFC in his debut fight and get a world championship shot against Francis Ngannou or John Jones. That right there would be the travesty or the lack of credibility in the top league of MMA, which is the UFC, right? That would absolutely discredit them if they were to do something like that. And on top of the fact that they would justify it with whatever propaganda they want to come up with to convince you that it's the right thing to do, which is give Tyson Fury a title shot. Now, obviously, I'm exaggerating, but if you were to give Khamzat Chimaev the title shot over Dricus du Plessis, in the eyes of many people, it's literally equivalent to that. You might as well give Tyson Fury a title shot against the heavyweights of the UFC with never having an MMA fight under his belt just because he's the bigger name and the A side when it comes to combat sports relevance among everybody else in the heavyweight division. So what about Chito Vera versus Sean O'Malley? Is this a great fight in terms of marketing value? I'm going to tell you guys this. I think Sean O'Malley is one of those guys that can sell pay-per-views by himself. Sean O'Malley is the type of guy that can go in there with a no-name nobody and still sell because he's Sean O'Malley. Now, I don't know if UFC 292 had the numbers to prove that, because you got to remember, a lot of people out there make claims about pay-per-view numbers, and oftentimes we don't know if it's true or not. And then we don't know what is the agenda behind why people are given these particular numbers as opposed to, let's say, giving the truth or maybe stretching the truth or exaggerating the numbers a little bit, or maybe disclosing just, let's say, the U.S. sales as opposed to overall international sales. Either way, there's a lot to unpack with that particular concept. But the one thing that you cannot deny about Sean O'Malley's last fight in UFC 292 was that everybody in that particular arena in Boston Garden was going crazy for Sean O'Malley and everybody else in that fight, but more importantly for Sean O'Malley. Now, obviously, there's a contingent of Irish fans or Irish descendants in Boston as Sean O'Malley being part of that tribe. So you got to think that kind of goes hand in hand, right? But then you have this aspect of Sean O'Malley that is truly in touch with the modern influencer / hip hop culture of the modern world. You look at him, he strikes you as somebody that looks more like a modern rapper rather than somebody who fights in a cage, which, by the way, ultimately really makes him an intriguing concept to market in the UFC's advertisement to a bigger, wider audience. Now, I remember a couple of days ago, I said something to the effect that Conor McGregor is responsible for bringing the hip hop community into the world of mixed martial arts more than any athlete out there. Because guess what? If it wasn't for Conor McGregor, I stand firm by this opinion that the entire game, at least on the American side of MMA, would look like a bunch of blue haired emo skaters if Conor McGregor never entered the game. He brought hip hop, he brought a different culture to the game, he brought a different set of.
All right. So that in and of itself right there was basically the entire preview to UFC 297, 298, and 299. Now, the reason why I had gone on with that was because right before the Shakur Stevenson stream had ended with covering the fight, I played a video that basically talked about. Well, I'm sorry, I didn't play a video. I was going over some of the fights that you're going to see in UFC 296. And obviously, I followed suit with 97, 98, and 99. Now, what about 300? Let's talk about 300 because Conor McGregor was the center of attention in that. Is he or isn't he? And then in the midst of that, people are hinting at situations where he has some sort of mental health crisis going on, right? Well, I obviously made a video about that. You guys can go check it out. I will show you a different video, though. This is a different video that is not really pertaining to this particular subject or this particular time frame, but the video that I had made, McGregor becoming a victim of his own success. It is right on the video section of this channel. If you want to check it out, it is literally right here. Yeah. So right here, this one right here. Let me big screen this right here so you can see that. So yeah, it is this one right here, this video. And then the live portion that I did of that was not too long ago. It was yesterday, so it's at 811 views right now after 2 days. Not bad, not bad for a new channel. So check that out. It's obviously going into some reactions to Conor McGregor and his particular health crisis. And even in that live, I did play a portion of McGregor's victim of his own success video. So I urge you guys to check that out. Now, regarding Conor McGregor, I did mention or made a video like a while ago, not too long ago, but where is this regarding Ed, I'm sorry, what's the guy's name? O'Neal. O'Neal, where yeah, Conor McGregor and P. Diddy's life is running out. So I did some things where let's see here. Where is this? Oh, here, okay, here it is. Conor McGregor and Rob O'Neal 2 months ago. I did fame will ruin your life. Now, there's some important lessons to try to understand this. Obviously, if you guys don't know and have been living under a rock, uh, what's his name?
So after doing a 9/11
O'Neal.
episode, you
Hold
got
on.
to ask
Rob O'Neal is the Navy SEAL that killed Osama bin Laden. And the reason why I wanted to bring up this particular video and why I made a video comparing Conor McGregor to Rob O'Neal is because, well, for one, you got to understand, right? Life as a fighter, you're not meant to be super world famous to any degree. And you have to understand that, right? At least originally, in the way that the sport was made, it was not made for you to be a superstar. Same thing in the world of special operations and whatnot, right? You are living in a world of secrecy where fame is not your objective. Rather, your objective is to save lives and to get into some action and be quiet about it. But then what happens when fame gets involved into the whole entire scenario? This is what I can offer you right now with this particular subject. So here it is.
yourself, how am I going to follow up something like that? especially with a video following that, with the Sean Strickland video that got about like 1,000 views in one day, and probably even more counting as the days go on and the hours go on. But nonetheless, I wanted to talk to you guys about something that I think is a great follow up to a 9/11 video, which is none other than Ed O'Neill, the Navy SEAL that was involved with the bin Laden raid back in 2011 when Osama bin Laden was supposedly shot and killed by SEAL Team 6. So, why is this significant? Because I thought that in the recent news, Ed O'Neill was caught uh, being belligerent, drunk in public, and beating up a security guard. And even worse, according to some news reports, and make of that as you will, he dropped the N bomb on the security guard, but also take notice that the security guard was a white guy. So, who do you want to believe in that instance? And however you want to interpret that story is up to you. However, I think that it's important to try to compare the life of Ed O'Neill to his, I guess, fellow Irish counterpart, Conor McGregor, right? Because obviously O'Neill is an Irish name. I thought it's really interesting to bring this up because there's a few dynamics I can bring up from this. For one, you got to understand when you're a tier one operator or somebody that is in the community of, let's say, special forces or maybe even espionage, intel communities or something like that, this is a type of life that is a warrior's life, but nonetheless, it is a life where you got to lead in secrecy. You can't be out there. You can't be famous. You can't be braggadocious. You can't be loud. You can't be noticed. None of that. But that is the quintessential opposite of what Conor McGregor is. But the reason why I thought it was a great comparison to look at these two is that ever since Ed O'Neill came out in public saying that he shot Osama bin Laden, and by the way, an interesting thing to bring up about that, there's a lot of people, and look this up because I'm actually inspired doing this video by watching a podcast by a couple of these tier one operators talking about how Ed O'Neill was not really the guy that shot Osama bin Laden. That the guy who shot Osama bin Laden was none other than, let's say, a SEAL Team 6 member that still lives in secrecy, that still doesn't have an identifiable name. But why did Ed O'Neill get the credit? Well, make of that as you will. Maybe there's reasons as to why. Maybe they thought, okay, you know what? Maybe we can use this guy as the front face cover, the spokesman of some sort, and maybe somebody that can inspire the next generation of upcoming tier one operators and Navy SEALs. Okay, so that can be a great possibility. That can be an absolutely great possibility. But what about the guy that actually went out and did the shooting? Well, maybe he didn't want to leave the Navy yet, and maybe he wanted to continue service for a longer time than, let's say, Ed O'Neill, who may have gotten out a lot sooner than, let's say, the other, the real point man of the situation of this raid. But nonetheless, that is the controversy that is going on with Ed O'Neill right now. It's almost like he is stoling the valor of his teammates that were part of the raid. Now, ever since he went out on tour, he started doing all these speaking, uh, like, occasions or whatever, where he gets invited to, let's say, talk at a radio station or a podcast. I even saw him do a podcast with Joe Buttons. Obviously, he does podcasts with other tier one operators. But ever since then, he started gaining millions. He got a book deal. He started advising for TV shows that dealt with Navy SEALs and special forces and things of that nature to kind of make it look real. Very similar to how the LAPD goes and advises all these different cop shows that they have going on to give some sort of realistic aspect of reality rather than trying to make some kind of B-rated movie that just really doesn't look like it makes sense, right? So that's one of the advantages of having these type of guys there. Now, with Conor McGregor, ever since he became double champ, the guy was just an absolute menace of a thing, right? He started getting into fights in the pubs. Obviously, the famous scene of him punching an old man at a CCTV camera in Dublin, Ireland. Him smashing a cell phone of a fan in Miami, who, by the way, was a British national that was in Miami and saw McGregor and thought, hey, maybe I could go get a picture with this guy, but agitated McGregor. There was that Italian DJ, I forgot his name, Facchinetti. I knew that it was such a funny name that he had going on, but yeah, Facchinetti. You know, he goes and punch DJ Facchinetti for whatever reason he has. But of course, I can play advocate on that and say something to the effect that maybe perhaps Connor felt provoked. Maybe he felt like, okay, maybe this guy's just being a little bit too aggressive, maybe just stepping out of line. The way that a lot of people really depicted that situation was as if McGregor was an absolute sociopath that would just go off on you for no reason. Now, there's other incidents where he threw a woman off a yacht and then just basically she went to the Dublin police and then went to the Spanish police, and nothing came of it because, again, it's very dark and muddy in terms of what it is that you're looking for here when it comes to wrongdoing, or was there any evidence that these things were done to any capacity, right? So make of that as you will. The point is, one of the things you got to take into consideration with Conor McGregor and Ed O'Neill is ever since they had fame, I think is when their eventual downfall and the diminishing of their old selves started happening. In other words, here you are, you're in this profession where you have to live a life of secrecy. At the same time, you also have to, I guess, I don't know if it's really important recruiting. I mean, not really, because there's always going to be people out there that are going to want to join tier one special operations groups, right? So I don't think propaganda of recruitment is needed in any capacity. And take into consideration, one of the things that you can really credit America on is the fact that they know how to recruit people without forcing them. And of course, they had to get creative in these ideas when you were dealing with, let's say, a disgruntled population that did not want to have anything to do with the Vietnam War when they had a draft going on. So kudos to them. They know how to get people to be motivated to be part of these tier one operational groups. The problem that they really have overall is trying to get people to join, let's say, conventional groups, which is really the most needed that they have to fulfill in terms of recruitment, because of the fact that there's just more people that are in those numbers. But at the same time, even with the minimum physical fitness requirements, there's just way too many people out there that are just not, how do I say this? I mean, physically fit to do so. We have a very obese population in America right now. And because of that, you're going to deal with a very difficult recruiting method in terms of qualifications. And then on top of that, you got to lower standards. So that's neither here or there. The point of the matter is, I just think that it's very fascinating the type of trajectory that Ed O'Neill's life had gone to after he had left the Navy and became, as famous as he is in terms of, let's say, being this well-known celebrity worldwide. And what's interesting about this is that MMA fighters and tier one operators are not supposed to be famous. At least historically speaking, when I say MMA fighters are really not supposed to be famous, I'm literally saying historically speaking, because before Conor McGregor, MMA fighters could just live a normal life, right? They didn't have to be on YouTube. They didn't have to have social media. They didn't have to create all these presence on the media sphere for them to be, I guess, considered a fighter. Or, I mean, the point of the matter is nobody fought for fame, is what I'm trying to get at with uh, the prior to the Conor McGregor era. Nobody wanted to be famous in the MMA world. What they wanted to do in the MMA world was go in there and test themselves against some of the best martial artists in the world. And because of the fact that there was no money in it, there was no huge interest from thousands and millions of people around the world. The pursuit of it was noble, okay? Because nowadays, if you are a mixed martial arts fighter or you are an upcoming prospect, what are some of the dreams and aspirations that you have? Well, is it to make more money? Yes. Prior to 2005, 2006, or something to that effect, where television deals really started to take off for mixed martial arts companies, that was not the mindset of many people. Their mindset was not, you know what, we're going to go out and we're going to make money. It wasn't what they wanted to do because it just wasn't available. Well, now, after Forrest Griffin and Stephen Bonner got into that barn burner of a fight in the Ultimate Fighter series final, it put UFC on the map in ways that it never put mixed martial arts on the map ever before. And what that meant was now you're going to have more sponsorships. You're going to have Tap Out on a global scale. If you guys remember Tap Out, which was a big mixed martial arts company before all these brands started taking over as a singular force in, let's say, in commercials, right, where you have Reebok, you had Venom, and then you only had Reebok and Venom, and that was it. They didn't allow anything else on the canvas. But back in those days, Tap Out was a very big brand, but it wasn't the only brand. There were other guys that were coming in there with shorts, such as Headrush, Dethrone, which was very big for Conor McGregor and for Jose Aldo. Bad Boy, a very big brand for Vitor Belfort and the likes of Chris Weidman. So all these things were a reality in mixed martial arts in the mid 2000s and moving forward. Now, the art of mixed martial arts is not so much about just the art in and of itself. Now it's about notoriety. Now it's about fame. And it's not anymore about, well, this guy can beat this guy, or this guy would be a good matchup for this guy, or maybe we can get this guy to fight this guy because they got beef going on. It was more like, nah, I'm not going to fight this guy. He doesn't have the proper ranking. Because now they introduce rankings into the UFC. If you notice, it wasn't really too long ago they really started implementing rankings. Okay, prior to that, in the 2010s, in the early 2010s, there was no such thing. So there was no value that you're giving to these people. Well, how does this relate to Ed O'Neill? Well, guess what? Being a tier one operator, you didn't get into it just so that you can be famous or anything like that. You got into it for the simple fact that you wanted the world to be safe. You wanted to have the satisfaction of knowing that you were the guy that was behind all these things. But then, more importantly, there wasn't any of this book deal that was present or is guaranteed if you were to go into a military career. There's none of that. It's not guaranteed. And you're going to be okay with it, just like you were okay with making $100 a fight while you were fighting for scraps back in the day. This is important to know that. These are the parallels and the realities of mixed martial arts fighters and tier one operators. More so with MMA fighters, because guess what? As an MMA fighter, you are encouraged to be a rock star. But as a martial artist, you're not encouraged to be a rock star. And I want you to know the difference. When you're a mixed martial arts fighter, you're required to be a rock star. But why do I say that? For the simple fact that it's just good and lucrative for your brand. You're able to market yourself a whole lot better. Not only that, you're able to leverage negotiations when it comes to contract deals, when it comes to contract renewals. And then on top of that, you're able to give yourself an advantage when it comes to, let's say, closing in on commercial deals, being able to have sponsorships. That's where it's important. As a martial artist, none of that matters. So, being an MMA fighter, you got to cross the lines between being an actual MMA fighter, which means, and everything that encompasses with being a business, being a brand, being a product, and as a martial artist, as just somebody that just lives the life of a warrior. Well, when you're a Navy SEAL or you're a tier 1 operator anywhere in the world, you got to understand that all you need to do is just one thing. You just need to learn to be a martial artist. Yes, when you're a tier 1 operator, in some way you are a martial artist, not a hand-to-hand martial artist, because I can tell you it doesn't translate the same, right? Like if you're a tier 1 operator and you're great at what you do, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to translate over to the cage or to the boxing ring or to Muay Thai competitions or anything like that. It doesn't translate by any stretch of the imagination. So that's another thing I wanted to talk about, right? Was in the United States, it's a lot easier for, let's say, tier 1 operator guys to go out and train with civilians, whereas you go in Russia, I noticed that the way that these guys train in Russia, right, when it comes to hand-to-hand combat, it's almost like you have to be in the military or had experience in the military for you to be able to get these techniques that they teach you in Sambo. Khabib's dad had to be former military in order for him to have all these skills that he taught Khabib. Whereas in the United States, I think that the private sectors of the martial arts business and the military are inherently separated, not within the circumference of each other's chain of command. However, at the same time, they have a very good relationship, right? Because even though the military doesn't provide good training when it comes to hand-to-hand combat, the one thing you can guarantee is that if you're living in America, you're going to find plenty of gyms that are going to teach you real good techniques, such as the Gracies, such as Greg Jackson Wink, and to just name, a whole bunch of different names just for the sake of naming names. But either way, one of the things that a lot of people have to understand is that, you can't be you can't be famous when you fight. You can't. It was great for Conor McGregor. It was great for the fact that he was able to make a lucrative endeavor out of it. But the problem is that the more famous you are, the more problems you get. The more money you have, the more problems that it brings. So you're probably wondering, like, how do these two guys relate with each other in any kind of way other than the fact that these two guys have an Irish heritage? Well, I think that it was just important to bring up because here's another thing, right? I've heard from a lot of people about this particular story with Ed O'Neill, and I thought that it was crazy that he's in these web of lies that a lot of these tier 1 operators are saying that he's under. And yet, this guy is supposed to be the most famous guy in the world in a job where you're really not required to be famous at all.
Let's be real. Life can get tough to say the least, and especially without someone to talk to. And as men, this topic seems to be brushed off when it doesn't need to be that way. And so that is why I recommend starting therapy with BetterHelp. Because, as a guy, we're often taught to carry all this weight on our shoulders to figure it out on your own. But when you hold everything inside, it just slowly starts to break you down. And you just don't ever want to get to that place where all that bottled pressure explodes. And I believe that relieving that pressure is the best way to get you right back on your path. BetterHelp is the largest online therapy platform worldwide. All you have to do is visit their website or download their mobile app. All you gotta do is answer a few questions, and BetterHelp can match you with a licensed therapist that best meets your needs. And it's very easy. You can meet your therapist through online video chats, a phone call, or even live texting if you're a bit shy. And you can do this all within the comfort of your own home. If you're not jiving with your current therapist, you can always switch to a new one with just a few taps. That is definitely something you can't do in person, which makes it that much more accessible because the platform has over 30,000 licensed therapists.
In recent times, it seems Anthony Joshua has taken a completely different career trajectory. And what exactly do I mean by that? Well, you look at the guy, he is now a bit of a gangster as opposed to before. Now, let me give you a little backstory to sort of understand what is going on. And for those that have listened to my content for a long time, I have mentioned this about Anthony Joshua in relationship to Tyson Fury's downfall, in terms of Anthony Joshua becoming a unified champion after Tyson Fury dropped his belts. And what exactly is that? Well, Tyson Fury was the politically incorrect champion, and now that he's regained his titles after the Deontay Wilder fights, he still is that guy. He still is very unhinged, shoots off the mouth, doesn't really have any filter. Whereas with Anthony Joshua, it was a little bit different. Anthony Joshua was in this circle of mainstream appeal. So because of that, he had to act a certain way. Well, now fast forward a couple of years later, no longer the unified champion, no longer, let's say, the bigger star that he was back then in terms of being able to fill up stadium fights, right? I mean, it sort of indicates those signs, considering the fact that he went from having stadium fights to having fights in the O2 Arena, which is not a knock, but O2 Arena fights, if you're a big boxer like Anthony Joshua, those are prospect fights. Those are, at best, UFC fight nights, even though UFC's held some pretty big events there. Nonetheless, a downgrade. So when you're going through all that, it's a little bit easier to put your mind in the gutter, to put your mind at a situation where I don't care what anybody thinks of me. I don't care what this guy says or this guy and this and that. Imagine, try to put it like this in this particular scenario, right? Let's say you had a corporate job, and the corporate job really, really absolutely requires you to be clean cut and toe to line. In other words, you're not going around saying controversial things, you're not saying offensive things, and you're playing the inclusive game, okay? And maybe you're not that guy. Maybe you're a guy that doesn't have a filter. I know a lot of guys that are like that, right? That have corporate jobs. They had a corporate job, and every time they punch that clock, they got to play this role of trying to be somebody they're not. And then when they clock out and they're at home, they're completely different people. I think we're all like this to a certain degree, right? For the most part. Now imagine, let's say you have two different scenarios where you're Donald Trump or you're a person that just got fired from this job. What do they have in common? The person that got fired and Donald Trump. What do they all have in common? What they have in common is they don't care. They have all the money in the world. They don't need money from you. They don't need to appease you or any corporation of that matter. And they're going to say what they want. This is now Anthony Joshua in a nutshell. Anthony Joshua is not only Donald Trump, meaning that he has FU money, but he's also that guy that got fired from that corporate job, and now he can say whatever he wants after years of suppression. So this is the reality of Anthony Joshua as we know it today. Also, let's take into consideration Anthony Joshua is also a person that comes from a very violent
Back on the line, so
England, which, by the way, is a city right outside of London, or within the London city.
So the reason why I decided to sort of bring this up right here is because obviously there's been some recent talks about Anthony Joshua and how he goes about his current status in the current moment of time and how he acts a little bit more gangster, a little bit more abrasive. My argument, and the reason why I wanted to play this video that I just made not too long ago, literally today, and uploaded, is because I'm trying to highlight that Anthony Joshua has always been this guy. He's always been the guy that came from the hood, came from a very rough background, and all of a sudden he gets into this situation where he is now, let's say, a big time celebrity, right? So now he's in a different stratosphere to where he has to act and move differently. So just wanted to highlight that, and let's continue on with the video here.
Limits that has stabbings, has shootings, has gang warfares and drug dealing, prostitution, and maybe even human trafficking to a certain degree. You come from a place like this, it ain't nothing nice, okay? You'll see a little bit of his true personality when, let's say, he got confronted by those college students, right? Or he actually confronted these college students that were shouting a bunch of nonsense at him from a balcony. And lo and behold, guess what Anthony Joshua does? Knock, 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 knock. Who's there? It's Anthony Joshua. You're talking smack about me? Let's take this outside, or let's settle this right here. And he told him, hey, listen, I don't know what you guys are seeing on the media, but I'm not all about that hype. And I think I know exactly what Anthony Joshua means when he said that to those kids. What exactly does he mean by that? Is this: just because you see me acting politically correct on TV, it doesn't mean that I'm not going to punch your lights out in public or in private. And this is Anthony Joshua in a nutshell. So now you go into the press conference, right? Anthony Joshua was confronted by his former rival, a guy that he was supposed to fight, Jarrell Miller. Jarrell Miller couldn't make it because he tested positive. And in comes Andy Ruiz, and you guys know the rest of the history, especially for my boxing historian fans out there. And not only that, people that understand boxing from its recent history, because that was just not too long ago, around 2019, that Andy Ruiz fight happened. So fast forward, 2023, here we are. Now they're in a press conference in the same place again in London, this time taking on different opponents. Great. So what is great about this? The difference between Anthony Joshua now and then, guess what? He's going to talk back to you. He's not suppressed anymore. If you remember, the way that Jarrell Miller went after Anthony Joshua back in the 2019 presser, the guy didn't want to really say anything back to Jarrell Miller. He wanted to take the high road. You know, this is the thing that a lot of people that don't come from, let's say, the hood, or people that come from the street culture, or people that come from an honor culture of any kind, they don't understand that you sometimes just can't be the bigger person. Could you try being the bigger person if, let's say, God forbid, any of you get locked up and now you're in jail? Now you have to be in a situation where you have to play the tough guy role, because if you don't, you're going to get eaten alive by the killers that are in jail, the predators, the vultures, all these people that, well, will take advantage of you in a drop of a hat. You can't. So you got to talk back. And guess what Anthony Joshua did in that press conference? He talked back and did exactly what Anthony Joshua normally does when the cameras aren't off, when the cameras aren't on, when the cameras are not around, when he's not facing the media, when he's not shooting commercial advertisements. And also, we're seeing the AJ that we knew him to be before he was AJ, the gold medalist. This is the real AJ, whether you like it or not. In my personal opinion, I like it. Not only do I like it, I love it. I think it's great. I think it's genius. I also think it's a new evolution in his character, which is something you have to do. Everyone that has a gimmick, that has a shtick, or even some kind of persona, let me tell you, it's a testament that over time, you have to evolve your character. Colby Covington, he was a guy that was the plain Jane wrestler. All of a sudden, he evolved into this Trump MAGA guy. Okay, so now Trump is slowly losing relevancy in the world stage as a world leader. Now you have to evolve. Now you have to be Colby Covington, the guy that is some sort of a Ric Flair character of some sort. And what do I mean by that? Styling, profiling, limousine riding, all of that, right? He evolved his character. Same thing with Henry Cejudo. He evolved his character, whether you think it's cringe or not. Over time, you have to change. Hollywood Hulk Hogan. Before he was Hollywood Hulk Hogan, who was he? He was the immortal Hulk Hogan, the American hero Hulk Hogan. And then after that died down, the 80s, where it was just all about Reagan and America is great. America is the all-powerful mighty of the world, and America is the beacon of good of the world. In came the 90s, the era of Bill Clinton scandals, the era of political change, and, well, whatever you want to describe the 90s in comparison to the 80s. But lo and behold, what happened? He became Hollywood Hogan, because this is what you do when you evolve your character over time. And Anthony Joshua is no different than Hulk Hogan becoming the red and yellow good guy, now becoming the OG gangster, gang leader of the NWO, or in Anthony Joshua's case, that top boy of London that we've always known him to be. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Yes. So I got to tell you, one of the biggest problems that many people have with Anthony Joshua is that, well, if he acts one way, it is as if he is somehow the worst thing ever, right? And if he decides to behave in another way, it is as if, like, we've never seen this from him before. And this is primarily one of the reasons why I wanted to highlight this particular video, was because I wanted to show you guys that there's a different side to Anthony Joshua that not many people talk about. You got to remember, Eddie Hearn, you know who his favorite fighter is? And I don't know if I've mentioned this in this podcast or this particular content, or maybe elsewhere, or maybe in some private conversations I've had. But Eddie Hearn's favorite fighter, believe it or not, is Katie Taylor. Now, why is that? No, not primarily because Eddie Hearn has this sudden interest for women's boxing. Oh, no, no, no. It's a lot bigger than that. You see, in the world of where Ronda Rousey dominated the women's scene of MMA, and by the way, one can argue that she was the quintessential influence to even women's boxing, in came Katie Taylor, who was sort of the quintessential opposite of that: humble, hardworking, disciplined, sort of religious, doesn't trash talk or backbite anybody. So these are qualities that Eddie Hearn likes. These are qualities that, well, for trying to understand who he is within the ethos of what he stands for within the matchroom boxing mission statement, which is what? It's family above overall. Now, matchroom boxing is a family owned business. They run it like a family. They treat everyone in it like a family, sort of similar to the UFC, although UFC has more of a corporate feel to it. But what Matchroom has is literally what the UFC is trying to emulate in terms of family values and whatnot. And lo and behold, they have done that. Obviously, Dana fired nobody during the pandemic and made the show go on with the contribution of the people that were involved in it. Nonetheless, this is the type of people that he likes, that he wants to market. So in came Anthony Joshua after he signed him in 2012 after the Olympics. And guess what? He wanted to create this image of, well, a clean cut guy. And if you look at AJ's background, he is anything but clean cut. However, it's an important aspect to understand when you're trying to understand why AJ is where he's at. And now, after all these years, he's been completely suppressed with trying to hide who he is, being this hood guy from Watford, where somebody looks at you the wrong way, you go and, start a funk and do the damn thing. But that's neither here or there. So, speaking of some things that are, let's say, the quintessential um, backgrounds or behind the scenes of the fight business, here's a couple of things I wanted to bring in for mention. So, as you know, John Kavanaugh, he went to the MMA Hour this Monday to discuss certain things with Ariel Hawani. For one of them is Conor McGregor and his, his aspect of, how do I say this, mental health crisis that has been going on. And this is a subject that a lot of people are bringing up because of the fact that, well, Conor McGregor is going to not be in UFC 300. So they just decided, you know what? Maybe there's something going on here. But historically speaking, you got to understand, right? This has always been going on with Conor McGregor. If you notice, back in UFC 200, which was seemingly almost like an entire lifetime ago. So Connor was in a situation where they wanted to fight him at UFC 200. They wanted to put him in that event. And that was in the same event that John Jones and Daniel Cormier were going to be a part of. So with that, it was a situation where I think, as you know, John Jones got caught dirty to nobody's surprise. And now here comes Conor McGregor possibly fighting Nate Diaz in that same card. He said, I didn't want to do any of this because there was a lot of promotions that they wanted to do. So he wanted to take a bit of a minimalist route when it came to promoting and doing all these different advertisements and these photo ops and things of that nature. So they decided to put him in UFC 202. This is no different than what is going on right now with Conor McGregor potentially being put into UFC 300, but could potentially be pushed even further into, let's say, International Fight Week of, let's say, UFC 301 or UFC 302, which is a reason why he was in UFC 202 in the first place against Nate Diaz, because he didn't want to do all the promotions for UFC 200. So here we go again. So I'm going to play this video with John Kavanaugh, and more like a reactionary video to what had happened to the Ariel Hawani interview. And it was interesting because, as you know about John Kavanaugh, he is known to be the coach of Conor McGregor, which brings controversy in and of itself. But what a lot of people don't understand is, let's say, the wholesome, real personality and the real, well, how do I say this? The real nice guy martial artist that we know John Kavanaugh to be. You see, John Kavanaugh is involved in the IMMAF organization, which is an international mixed martial arts amateur organization that features different fighters from around the world and gives them a platform that before they go into the pros, or if you just want to fight MMA and not have to worry about, let's say, the politics of selling tickets and things of that nature, well, this is the route for you. But I thought it was really interesting, that particular video, because of the, let's say, different windows that John Kavanaugh reveals to us. So I'm going to play you this video and then we'll go from there.
In the MMA Hour with Ariel Hawani, courtesy of MMAfighting.com. And just a few minutes ago, they had John Kavanaugh as a live guest in the studio, and I wanted to give a little reaction to that. reason why is because I think John Kavanaugh doesn't get enough credit in terms of being a coach and in terms of how serious he takes coaching in MMA, just simply because, you know what? His fighter, Conor McGregor, one of his most famous students of all time, if not ever, is considered to be the metaphor of the guy that is not serious MMA. In other words, if you ask a casual fan who their favorite fighter is and they say Conor McGregor, guess what? Automatically in your mind, you think this guy is a casual. Just like if you're a soccer fan, a real hardcore soccer fan, and you say something to the extent that Ronaldo or David Beckham or Messi even is your favorite player. Not so much Messi, because Messi is in his prime right now, and you can't say that about, let's say, David Beckham or Ronaldo. So if you say Messi, you look more like a smart, informed fan. Whereas with the world of mixed martial arts, you mention Conor McGregor, you sound like the dumbest guy in the room. And I hate to really make it sound so brutally honest as that. That's just the reality of it. No one's going to respect you straight away because of the fact that Conor McGregor is synonymous with trash talking. He's synonymous with outrageous behavior. And even though he doesn't fake any of these things like Colby Covington or even Henry Cejudo, it's attached to his persona in some kind of way. So it's very difficult to take anybody seriously that is associated with Conor McGregor or anybody that full hand supports him in any kind of way. So in comes John Kavanaugh, a guy who was a former mixed martial arts fighter himself, a guy who is, by the way, the first ever jiu-jitsu black belt in Ireland. So this is quite an important thing to really bring up. Another thing that's important to bring up is his work that he does in the world of amateur MMA. And by the way, this is really the pinpoint narrative and the pinpoint thesis that I want to bring up to you is his work in amateur mixed martial arts. Because he said something very important that I think a lot of people need to really hear, which is what? He says that he loves amateur mixed martial arts. And by the way, keep in mind, this is the coach of none other than the notorious Conor McGregor. Keep this in mind as I'm saying this, as I repeat to you, not so much verbatim, but somewhere to that close extent of the things that he said about amateur MMA. He says he loves it because there's no politics involved. He says that if you win, you advance to the next level. He loves the Olympic architecture surrounding the IMMAF organization that is held in Bahrain. An organization, by the way, with the likes of Muhammad Makayev has been platformed in and dominated in and has given the right amount of practice for him to get ready for the pros. Now, this is the side of mixed martial arts that a lot of people don't see. Obviously, you're going to see the glamour side of mixed martial arts. You're going to see the presentation of the videos, the beef that is going on, the storyline, the drama that is all attached to it. But what you don't see is the amateur ranks that gets a lot of the pros there. And more importantly, he even mentioned something to the extent, you know what? These guys can just fight in the amateur world, not have to worry about selling tickets. They don't have to worry about promoting themselves or any of this nonsense that goes into the entertainment portion of mixed martial arts. And then they can go on about their lives, have normal jobs such as a school teacher, a policeman, an engineer, a doctor, a nurse, or anything in between. So, again, what we are seeing out of John Kavanaugh is the real John Kavanaugh outside of all the glamour and fame that is attached to Conor McGregor. And I think this is very interesting to bring up. I think this is very fascinating to understand. And not only that, I think that this right here is an eye-opening interview that I think everybody needs to see. For one, you got to understand a few things, right? What it means to be a coach. Let's just put John Kavanaugh to the side for a second. I know this video title is going to be about him, but let's talk about what a lot of MMA coaches go through. You have a big fighter, big name, big event, he wins on Saturday, like the likes of, let's say, Tom Aspinall, right? I know that he's not coached by John Kavanaugh, but I'm just giving you sort of a scenario of what John Kavanaugh, Faraz Zahabi, and Tim Welsh, and all these other top coaches in the MMA game right now go through. Not so much Tim Welsh, because I think that he's exclusively only training Sean O'Malley. So if Sean O'Malley wins and he's done with the fight, he's going to be hanging out with Sean O'Malley and not going to, let's say, another fighter, not going to another match that they have to be held in the next coming weeks or so, right? Because this is exactly what John Kavanaugh is describing. He has this big event, he's done with it, but he has to worry about coaching the next guy for the next week. So it is an absolute roller coaster ride. He also mentions that he can't be too hyper about the wins in terms of happiness, and he can't be too sad about the losses. So he has to keep his emotions somewhere in between. And I think this is really important for a lot of MMA fans to understand, because when it's 1 a.m. in the middle of the night and everybody goes home after the press conference, these guys either have to deal with these fighters and the craziness that they're going to be impending upon themselves on, let's say, their night of celebration. On the other side of that, they have to worry about the fighter who gets knocked out, gets sent to the hospital, and then having to do that ambulance ride from the arena to the hospital as they worry about their fighter that they put in there in extremely dangerous situations, or sometimes situations that they never saw coming, such as a head kick knockout or a devastating TKO, or maybe even a bad submission to where they got their limbs broken, or perhaps maybe got put to sleep in a long period of time that they shouldn't have, that caused some sort of serious bodily injury. So these are some of the things that you have to worry about as a coach of a professional fighter in the unpredictable world of MMA. So this is something that a lot of people have to understand and take a look at from the inside, because yes, the casual fans are what brings money into the sport. The hardcore fans have somewhat of a good understanding of what goes on, if not a full spectrum of understanding the business from head to toe. But more importantly, for the casuals, they need to understand this, because they are the money of this sport. And they are the guys that put money into the bank accounts of the fighters, of the media presentation, journalists, or the people that are, let's say, the managers, or anybody that's involved in the game that's making some sort of money up about it. A lot of this money comes from none other than the casuals. So you have to understand their place in this particular landscape of mixed martial arts, but they also have to understand the place of what fighters and coaches go through on the daily grind. So that is all that I have in the reaction for John Kavanaugh's conversation with Ariel Helwani. Don't forget to like and subscribe as I break down not only the techniques, not only the business side of mixed martial arts, not just the geopolitical landscapes that are attached to these fighters in the countries they come from, but the overall psychology of everything that deals with this wonderful sport called mixed martial arts.
Those of you that just saw that, that was, yes, the underrated life purpose of John Kavanaugh, Conor McGregor's MMA and BJJ coach. So, yeah, it's an important aspect to highlight these types of things, right? Because obviously, the way that everyone sees the fight game, it has a lot of smoke and mirrors. Obviously, you've seen Conor McGregor mention to Khabib mid fight, hey, it's just business after all this strange fiasco and insane level of fight promotion that they had to build up, which, by the way, really towed the line of reality versus entertainment fiction, right? And obviously, it spilled into reality in its most extreme form that you can possibly find. So that's literally all that we have for tonight. guys. I think that we covered a little bit of everything from MMA to the fight tonight with Shakur Stevenson and the Los Santos. By the way, George Cambosos had a tweet out tonight or some sort of social media post where he pretended he was sleeping while he was watching Shakur Stevenson. Basically, once again, the aspect of what other people look at and see as quintessentially boring if you're going in there and fighting a very technical fight. But sometimes not all fights are created equal. Some fights require a little bit more patience because what's better? Implementing patience and trying to do the right thing every step by step and not making a mistake, or making it exciting for fans to the point where you get caught, because sometimes being exciting means that you can get caught. And these fans, even though they pay your bills and even though they're the ones that pay money to see you fight, they're not your friend, because by the end of the day, they may have an agenda where they want to see you lose. So they want you to fight outside of your uh comfortability, or sometimes outside of what is safe for you, or what you deem as safe, or what is the right technical game plan that you need to implement. They want you to do the opposite because they want to make everything exciting. So that's all that I have. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Hope you guys liked the content that I brought you tonight. And I will see you again. We'll make more videos and more live streams all throughout the week. And inshallah, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you soon.